Hello, welcome. I'm Pauline from PQW and I've got some exciting things to show you. I want to talk to you about my favourite tools, how I use them and some great tips because we get asked regularly about the tools I use, and a lot of people have questions that they don't quite understand how to use the tool properly, or they may think that something's going wrong. How do we fix it? So let's go through a selection of what I've got on the table here. Now I'm going to show you and talk to you about some measurements also. So when we're doing our triangles, for instance, for a block, a lot of people, we follow a pattern and there can be great instructions in the patterns, which is absolutely fantastic. But sometimes we want to design a block ourselves. And it's working out what size we need to start with to end up with the actual finished size that we need. So I'm going to explain something a little bit to you about half and quarter square triangles and how to calculate the measurements, how I make my triangles, and a little bit about accuracy, and show you some great hints and tips to allow you to be able to achieve greatness in your patchwork blocks. So now to start with, I'm going to show you our quarter and half quest triangle rulers. This is what I use to get all of my triangles. I'm going to talk about why I'm now using the rotating mat and the bigger cutter, and about the marking pencils I use. A lot of people know that I love the Bohin fabric marking pencils. I want to show you how to set that up properly because we get a lot of questions, people breaking leads, people thinking they have to buy two pencils, which is great. I'm going to demonstrate with two pencils, but it can get expensive for a lot of people. So we're going to take you through a lot of things, and I'm going to show you the little 1 by 10 inch ruler and how fantastic that is for doing a lot of this intricate work. But when we get to our fabric, right, we're just going to talk about fabric and how we cut it. And, a lot of people get confused when they're working with big, bulky bits of fabric. If you don't know, I'm running a program which we call the quiz program, Quilting is So Simple. In episode 1 of that, I do show you how to fold the fabric, but I will be repeating that video again so you get more and more details. But just simply, if I was going to be using a piece of fabric, like I've got about 1 metre here, I would think. This is about 1 metre. The first thing I do is I put this out on my ironing surface, my normal ironing board, and I press out that centre fold. You know that fold that's always in there when you buy it straight from the quilt store? A lot of times that fold is not accurate, it's not straight, because the way they put the fabric onto the bolt, it can sometimes stretch off grain, it can sometimes stretch and go skew whiff. So I always press that out. Then I take my fabric and I take my selvage edge to selvage edge. So I'm folding across the width of the fabric. Okay, so selvage to selvage. Get those selvages exactly lined up, keep them nice and firm. I put it out on the ironing surface, and then with my hot dry iron, I will slowly press that new crease line in. So I've got an actual exact halfway line. Now we do want those selvages lined up exactly. If they're not, you might get a bit of a skew with cut. You know how they talk about that dog leg when you get a straight cut? That's usually because these selvages are not lined up exactly. So once you've pressed that fold back in, hold your fabric up again, hold it very firm with the selvage edges together, fold over and over, and now we've got the fold lining up with the selvages. See that? You can see the fold to the selvage. Hopefully you can see that nicely. Hold it up and let it drape down. Now I'm going to actually put a twist in this for you. Hopefully you can see a twist in that fabric. I can see it on my side quite nicely. Oops, I'll pick it up again. I can see that there's a big twist in the fabric. Now if I was to lay that down and press it and then cut, I would definitely have a dog legs in my strip. So what I'm going to do is with my fingers, I'm just going to move the fabric across till it starts to line up and it's exactly flat on that fold. Okay, give it a good shake, hold it very firmly, then put it down on your ironing surface. I'm just going to get rid of this mat. And it's always a tricky thing how to fold fabric. Now, this mat that I've got on my cutting board is actually an ironing mat. It came with my beautiful cutting table. Unfortunately, you can't get these tables anymore, so I can't let you know what brand it is or anything because they're no longer available. But I put that down, I get it all nice and flat, and then with my hot dry iron, I slowly press. So I get that nice press into there. Get it nice and even. And you know, if you've got a longer piece and you feel you need to, turn it over and press the other side. Now I've started using the wonderful rotating mat because I just feel with a lot of things we're doing and where I'm headed with things, the rotating mat is going to be brilliant. Now this one I use has got a great suction pad on the back. So when I put it down and press on it, it's not going to shift. And it's really quite hard to pull it off the table surface. So what I'm going to do is put my fabric. Now, a lot of people do not fold their fabric into four like I do. I always love to fold my fabric into four because I find it's a much neater cut, a much quicker cut, and more efficient, instead of having your fabric just folded in half, because when you've got your fabric folded in half and you're using a big long ruler, there's so much room for error as you cut along. So I like to fold it into four. Now I'm going to just use my normal ruler, so I've only got to use a short ruler. I'm going to line one of the edges on one of the lines of my ruler up on this folded edge. So I've got all the folds towards me. The fold and the selvages are facing out. And what we're going to do here now is align one of these lines up, hold my hand on here. I'm going to use the nice clover cutter. I always start my blade rolling before I get to the fabric. I don't start right on the edge because a lot of times we get that one or two threads that just don't connect. You go to pull your fabric away and you've just got that little thread. So always start rolling before it and go straight across. So I don't have to move my hand anywhere. So now I've taken that piece away. Always, please, always remember to close that blade before it leaves your hand. Teaching as I have over all of the years, it's really scary if I had to tell you the amount of people that have cut themselves quite badly by leaving that blade opened. And so many people, you know, leave the blade open, they're talking away, they put it down, and now if you're going to reach across that or do anything, when that blade's open, you run the risk of really damaging yourself or somebody else that may be in the classroom with you. So when you finish cutting with this, the minute you finish cutting, please train yourself to close that blade. Really good tip. Now I'm going to leave the ruler there. I'm going to pick up this piece of fabric that I have cut off. I'm going to open it out. This is my cut edge. This part here is my cut edge. I'm going to look at this to make sure I've got no dog legs in the top edge of this fabric. Now you can see it's horrible down here because that was the edge I've cut off. But I can look at that now and see that it's perfectly, perfectly straight. So from now on, what I'm going to do, once I'm right with that, if that was not right, I would go back and refold this fabric. It takes 5 minutes, it's so worth it. So now I'm going to pull this onto my board. I'm going to use the flower head pins. Now, I like to recommend the tools that I use and the reason why I use them. These are the clover flower head pins. I find them to be the flattest, the strongest, the longest, and they stay sharp. They don't lose their edge. So that's why I recommend these. So now I'm going to go along and I'm going to put a pin into that fabric, and I'm going to put 3 pins across here. So once I got those 3 pins in, that one's right, once I get the 3 pins in, now I can concertina this up, I can rotate the mat, I can open this out, I can put my ruler on here, and now if I want to cut 2.5-inch strips, I would have thought about the pins before I put them in, because if I'm doing 2.5 inches here, the pins are going to be in the road. So what I prefer to do is organise what measurements I'm going to be cutting, and I would then start in a little bit instead of starting where I started before, because that'll cause you extra work. Oops, come on through. I'm going to start in a lot further. And then I'm going to go and put some more pins. What I would normally do is put more pins in here throughout the length of the fabric. So from now on, all the cutting I do from this piece of fabric, I don't have to refold it and get a new straight edge. Because if you're folding your fabric in half and you cut 2 or 3 strips and you throw the piece of fabric over here, when you want to cut some more strips, you usually have to hold the fabric up again, realign it, get a new straight edge and start again. That means you're going to be throwing out a lot of very good, expensive fabric. So do it once. Prepare your fabric like this. So we'll put the other pins in. They're very, very sharp, so be careful of them. And you want sharp pins. You want them to just slide through so that you're not trying to dig them in and bend them. So now I can concertina this fabric up beautifully to fit onto my board. Now, if I want to cut my 2.5-inch strips, this fabric folded into 4 fits on the width of this circular board. Now, a lot of people ask me, why do I not use the square rotating board? I didn't like that because it went off balance. I did trial them, but it went off balance. This one doesn't lose its balance. This is the one I choose to sell. I highly recommend it. So 2.5-inch wide strip. We're going to line one of our lines on our ruler up on the edge of the fabric. We're going to line all of these lines up. We're going to hold our hand, you can hold it up or hold it flat, whatever you like. Start the cutter blade rolling before you get to the fabric and come on through. And there's your piece. So now I could keep going. I could cut another piece here now. Cut another one, undo it, cut another one, and you can see how easy it is. Now, if I was only going to cut 1 or 2 strips off here and I wasn't going to use this fabric in the quilt till later on, I can now just package this up, put it back with all the other fabrics, and if I come back to work on this quilt in 2 weeks' time, a month's time, 12 months' time, all I do is pick up my fabric, open it out and start cutting. And that's the only little bit of waste I'm going to get with trimming my edges. So that's how I fold my fabric. Just because it's a question we get asked so many times. Now, if I'm going to be doing half or quarter square triangle rulers, the measurements are really important. If you're going to start with squares, like I'm going to here, I've got my squares cut out. So I'll use the navy so you can see what I'm doing. I've got my squares cut out. I want a 3-inch finished triangle. So 3.5 inches to go into my block to be 3. So when we're doing a triangle, when we add our measurements to it, say for a 3.5-inch triangle, we add 7/8 of an inch more. Okay, that's the calculation. So you work out what your finished size is and add 7/8 of an inch more. Now sometimes I'll go to the whole inch, because once I've made the triangle I can then go back and trim it off just in case something goes wrong. But the actual measurement is 7/8 of an inch. So I'm going to use this navy fabric and the white to make 2 sets of triangles. I'm going to use any one of these 3 rulers. Now these are designed for doing large, medium and small triangles. I'm just going to use the small one. Now with this triangle, with this ruler, we know from the centre of this point out is our exact 1/4 inch. So that helps us a lot. I found when I used to draw a line from point to point and then stitch a 1/4 inch either side, then cut through the middle, these were turning out slightly different in sizes, which then when I put them into a block, they weren't all coming together accurately. So I now use this one. We're going to put the arrow head right into that right angle corner at the bottom. The ruler has a line through the middle. Now that line should come out on the tip of this right angle point. If it doesn't, it's telling you that you do not have an accurate square. So you can check both ways. The arrowhead is sitting right into that corner and the line is coming right through to this corner. So I know I've got a perfect square. So we'll put this on here. I like to use the Bohin fabric marking pencil, and because I'm using the navy fabric, I'm using the white lead. If I was marking on the white fabric, I would be using the grey lead, and I'll explain the pencil to you in a moment. So we're just going to put that on, draw, and it's a good idea when you're drawing, and this is where the rotating mat's fabulous, because I don't want to move this underarm, because I could move the ruler like I just did and put it all off. So once I've drawn one side, oops, I just leave the ruler there, rotate the mat. Now a little tip with drawing, with whatever you're using, I use this one. Another reason I love to use this, because it's a nice fine lead. And I'm going to lay the lead in right against the pencil. I'm not holding it upright because that gives me a thicker line. Lay it in against it and draw. And there we've got our perfect stitching line. So what we do next is we'll pick this up, put it to our opposing colour. I will then put a flower head pin into each side. Sometimes you don't have to do the pins, but if you're doing a lot of piecing through and you don't want things to move, these pins are fabulous. Do that, and then we'll go and stitch on that line, and then we're going to cut through the middle. Now that line, if we had have drawn the line through the middle and just stitched our 1/4 inch, I believe that line through the middle is not important, because that's our cutting line. It's not important. Our stitching line is so important. So these come out exactly the same size. So I've got one stitched up here. Well, I've actually got a couple stitched up, because I just go through and I chain piece them through one after the other and do a whole selection of them. Now when we cut through the middle, as I said, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be accurate, but it is nice to have everything the same. So this is where I use the little 1 by 10 inch ruler. So I'm going to lay this down so that the 1/4 inch line on this ruler is going to line right on that stitching line. I'm going to use the cutter and cut. And there's my 2 triangles done. So once I've done that, you know, I would, if I'm working on a big quilt or a big block, I'll go through and do a whole heap of sewing and cutting. Then I'm going to put the light coloured fabric on the ironing surface. Come to your iron and just slowly press. Now a lot of times you will notice when you've done your triangles that when you do the pressing that this can look like a crooked line. So one big tip I'm going to give you now, I'm not going to press it like I did that one. What I'm going to do first, on all of these stitching lines, I'm going to sit the iron on it. By stitching that stitching line, what you're doing is embedding the threads into the fibre of the fabric, because a lot of our threads will stretch if you don't set them in. So I always like to set them in, like I've just have, open it out, and then just gently with the heel of the iron, press that seam. Because I find that when I teach a lot of classes, one of the things that I find that happens if people don't press correctly is they have this little bit of a fold here. Now, if that you've got a little bit of a fold there, when you go to put these pieces together, they won't join because that little fold has made that triangle inaccurate. So you can look at that and see now that all of our triangles are exactly the same size. I love that doing it this way because the less you have to trim back and readjust, the quicker you're going to get your project finished. So they're my little tips for doing those triangles. Now, if I'm going to be putting these triangles together, let's say we wanted to put these two navies together, or we want to put the two whites together. I'll do the whites because I think you're going to see it more accurately. This is where I'm going to use the clover fork pin, the twin pin. Two pins joined together. Hopefully you can see that. I'm so surprised that a lot of people don't know about these. I'm also so surprised when I get out there and I go to the shows and I teach classes when people say to me, "Oh, I've had them for so long, but I don't use them." They have to be the best ever pins invented for getting your perfect points. So when I want to match these points up, and we do that nesting, now I've got both of those going in the same direction because I've got a navy and a white, okay? If I press it back the other way, which I'm going to do just to show you what can happen, I'll just repress this. We get that ugly seam showing through. Sometimes that doesn't matter because you might be using a medium fabric here and a dark here, or a floral and a light or something, and it doesn't show up. But I don't particularly like to see that sort of thing happening where the fabric underneath in the seam allowance shines through. So just be aware of that. But if they are both going the same direction, okay, that's how it shows up. It doesn't worry some people, and maybe once I've quilted this, it wouldn't worry me, but just be aware of that. That can happen. I'm just going to press this seam back the other way again, just so I can show you if both seams are going in the same direction, how these pins will help you. Okay, so we're going to nest them together. And nesting is where those two seams come into each other. If I do it that way, we're going to have them the opposite. We want them going this way. Nest them in where those two seams are lining up exactly. Oops, we'll just do that. Okay, I've got those two seams lining up exactly. So now with that fork pin, I find if I was to use a normal pin here, when I put the pin in on this stitching line, it's going to actually have to fit in there, so it moves your seams apart. When you use the double pin, it's going either side of the stitching line, and we just push it through, and you only just need to push the tip through. Okay, so now when I join this together and I sew down this seam, that will be a perfect match. So let's just have a look. Oh, presto. Absolutely perfect. You can see that if I seam my 1/4 inch down there, and it looks a little bit bigger than a 1/4 inch because that's where the pin is, but see how that's matching perfect? And that's what you're after. One pin, one perfect point. So just take a few of those little tips on board. Pressing is very important. Cutting is very important. Accuracy, some people don't worry if their points don't match, but I think once you start to know how to match your points, things will turn out for you so beautifully, you'll be absolutely delighted. So now we're going to turn this around and we're going to nest our seams. So we've got going to the dark, going to the dark. We're going to nest that in. Hold and pop the pin in. Just put the tip through, that's all you need. Then when we sew down here, this will be where our stitching line's going to be. Let me just draw it. That will be my stitching line. And you will get that perfect point every time. And I'm going to show you a little bit about perfect stitching and that in the next part of this lesson as we move through, because it is a 3-part lesson, so you're going to learn a lot of little different hints and tips. So that is a half square triangle. Now, if we want to do like a half square triangle is where you're going to put triangles into a block or into a quilt where you need straight grain on these edges around the outside. You never want to have a bias edge across here because you'll get too much stretching of the block. You want this to set nice and firmly. So that's where we use the half square triangles. But if we were going to make, I'll just show you this quilt where we've put these blocks into this quilt. Because if everything is accurate from your cutting point right the way through, when you come to join these blocks together, because there's the blocks there, oops, there's the blocks there. You can see that. When they come together, everything is matching perfectly. We've got more blocks over here. And it's a real joy to just sit down, take your time cutting. Cutting is the most important step. Get accurate right from your cutting. Your piecing will just naturally come together beautifully, and your points are going to be coming together just as you want them to. So that's all of our half square triangles in there. And it is a quilt as you go quilt done in one of our quilt as you go techniques. But let's show you another quilt. This is just a bit of a sampler to show you the difference between a half and a 1/4 square triangle. When we do these blocks, see how we've got the triangle is not sitting at a right angle? The long edge is across the top, where with this one, the long edge is on the diagonal here. And I've got the straight grain. So I want straight grain here. So this is where we would use a 1/4 square triangle. So we're going to start with a square and we're going to stitch it to be 4 triangles coming out of the one square. That way we can use 1/4 square triangles in a block. So the straight grain is all the way around the outside edge. Then we can use half square triangles here to have the straight grain around the edge. So that takes a little bit of getting the head around, and a lot of people ask me about that. So that's why I decided to put this into this little lesson. So now, to do our 1/4 square triangles, when you're calculating your measurement for a 1/4 square triangle, to start with a square, cut it into 4 to get 4 triangles out of it, you add 1 1/4 inches to it, to your finished measurement. So I'm starting out here, and what size did I do this? This is 4 inches. So it's 4 1/4, sorry. So I want a 3-inch finish, so I've cut it 4 1/4 inches. So we've got our squares cut out with the 1 1/4 extra added to give us our finished size. I've got my white and my navy lined up exactly on top of each other. Then we're not going to stitch this. All we're going to do is use our little ruler, our 10 by 1. We're going to line it up on the corners. You could use these rulers, but you'd be off with your measurement. Okay, so that's why I'm going to use this. And there's other ways I can show you to do quarter square triangles with these rulers, but that'll be in another lesson because I don't want it to be too complicated to start with. I just want to explain things to you. So we're going to just lay this down and cut, leave it in place, rotate. You can see how beneficial the rotating mat is. Then we're going to line this up again and we're going to cut. Okay, so now we've got all of our triangles and we've got 4 of each colour. So now when we look at this, remembering that was a square, so we can see the straight grain is where it needs to be. It's on that outside long edge. So if I was going to put this into a block like so and make a couple of units up like this, we can see how easy that will go together. And we've got the straight grain around all outside edges. You know, there's so many different blocks that you can make. I could put this one down and put the white here. So we're now getting a big square in the middle, which is actually triangles. So you can see how this makes a beautiful border for a quilt. But we could change it around, and this is where it's so fabulous playing with fabric and coming up with all your different designs. So to stitch this together, it'll need accurate piecing, where you'll be just picking up. And when you're piecing this together, it's knowing what side you're going to join to what. That's where it can get confusing, and that's why I wanted to just go over this method with you. Sometimes I'll put a pin there, or I'll just, with my white lead, I might just put a mark there so that I know where I'm going to be stitching, so that when I put these together, I know how I'm going to piece those through the machine and just chain piece them through. So I'll just be going one after the other and chain piecing them all down till I got the whole lot done. And I might be doing 100 of them for a quilt, but it's very easy to cut them. Once you've got the right rulers and the equipment, it makes it very easy. But look how good that mat is. And it doesn't move on me. It's really wonderful. So that's all there is in this lesson. It's just a very brief lesson, but I've got a lot more to come in the next lesson. So stay tuned. Join me tomorrow.